Welcome to Facts Over Fandom, where we try to do sport leadership in about, 30 minutes or less. Used to be 10 minutes or less, but I realize I'm a little bit too long-winded, so it's hard to do only 10 minutes. I miss doing the show. It's been a few months since I've done the show. Been battling some health issues and still don't feel 100%. But I saw the news break today about the college betting scandal, and I had to jump in. And this is a show that I've been wanting to do for a number of months now. But broke just a few hours ago. 20 men were charged in a point-shaving scheme involving more than 39 college basketball players on more than 17 NCAA Division I teams and leading to more than 29 games being fixed. And this is according to an indictment that was unsealed Thursday as we record this on January 15th. So news from David Payne Purnam. So I got so many thoughts on this and how can we relate this to leadership. But this is no longer about a potential risk. And if you read the story from David Wayne Purnam here, or just David Purnam, it's confirmed systemic corruption that we're dealing with in college athletics. A quote from the article, and this was from a U.S. attorney. This particular point-shaving scheme scandal was about a significant and rampant corruption of college athletics. And so what we're going to talk about in this episode is that when gambling becomes normalized, leadership failures, not necessarily athlete morality, really become the real story. And this bothers me because I was a college basketball coach. I was a college AD. I know how much these people care, and I know what college athletics should be about. And I don't like it seeing what college athletics has become. And it's really become the wild, wild west. And now as a faculty member and a full-time faculty member for the past 10 years, people would always scoff at the idea of student athlete, and that's fine. You can scoff at that and you can say whatever you want. Like, I just know from my experience how important academics were to me and to the coaches that I worked for, and how important graduating players was and how important players getting good grades, how important that was. So, I understand that some of the bigger schools, student athlete, they're really just there to play athletics and all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. But college athletics now has just become, it's just an awful form of professional athletics. It's an unregulated form of professional athletics to this point. And people who know better, leadership that should know better, has just really kind of given in to the whims of those who don't see the repercussions of enacted legislation. And what I mean is that there's such this big push from pundits and people outside of college athletics where we got to open up NIL and we got to open up transferring and, we got to open up all these things, but they're not the ones who have to deal with the repercussions. They're not the ones whose livelihoods are on the line. And I'm not one to say that, players should get nothing, but I think we devalue the value of scholarships in room and board, in nutrition, in clothes, in fees, tutors, travel, all these things that these major college programs provided to their players. And I think athletes being able to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, and getting a percentage of the sales from things like their jerseys, or being able to sign autographs, whatever. I think there was a way to regulate that where players could profit from it. I don't have a problem with that. But now we've gotten to a point now where we're getting private equity involved. We're going to put billions in to this product, and we're not going to really have any guardrails. We got collectives who are going out and buying players. Kids are transferring every year to a new school. Or are you making progress on your degree? Like, what are we here for? If it's just going to be semi-professional athletics or minor league athletics, then at this point, just make them employees and treat them thusly. Or we're going to have to put football and basketball in a different category. But it really is the haves and the have-nots at this point. And this is leading to some of the problems here that we're seeing here in gambling. So the landscape, it has shifted, and it has shifted fast. Now with legalization, it means that there's access. So sport betting, it's legal in most states. I think back in 2017, the Supreme Court basically opened it up, and they took off the federal regulations and said states are allowed to make up gambling laws as they see fit. And now with all these different apps, the FanDuel, the DraftKings, the Bet360s, all these things, they provide instant access. And I don't even use these gambling apps, but I could probably rattle off about a half a dozen just because you are exposed to them everywhere in commercials and in ads on the internet, mailings, anything else, right? They're everywhere that you look. And so college athletes now, they live amongst this. One of the largest user groups are college age, especially males, but even females getting into it, is that college aged. So you only have to be 18 to get involved in this stuff. And so college athletes, they live among some of the biggest population, one of the biggest population of gamblers. So there's no security. At least there used to kind of be a little bit of a barrier between the bettors and the college athletes. It's not like that anymore. And so the NCAA, and I don't like to bang on the NCAA. I got friends at the NCAA, and, remember the NCAA, it's made up of member institutions. The rules come from the member institutions. So the NCAA itself is more of kind of, they oversee, they enforce the rules, but they also hand out punishments. And so athletes and staff, you can bet on professional sports. A few months ago, they said, no, don't bet on professional sports. Now they reversed that. Can't bet on college sports, but we're going to allow you to gamble, right? So it's a weird position with the NCAA where they're not endorsing it. They want to try to reduce the harm, and we're not going to endorse gambling. But if you want to bet on pro sports, it's fine. And I think that leads to some dangerous consequences. So you see some tension in leadership here where there's a mixed message. Okay, well, you can bet, but you can't bet here, right? And so integrity, it really now depends less on rules and more about culture, education, and leadership vigilance. And this is what I want to talk about mostly in this episode. So before we get into the leadership aspects of this, let's talk about why athletes are particularly vulnerable. Right? And it's now proven. This isn't theoretical, but I think this new federal case, it really changes everything. So again, we're recording here on Thursday, January 15th, and there were 39 players, 17 Division I programs, and 29 games fixed. And these players were taking bribes that ranged from $10,000 to $30,000. And they're going to now be charged with bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. And that's up to 20 years in prison, federal prison, for each count. And these are schools that you've heard of: DePaul, Tulane, Fordham, Buffalo, Southern Miss. There's others. So while they might not be, the group of four schools, kind of in football, familiar with that, but these are big D1 programs, or at least kind of high major programs. And what we see, this isn't just like a couple kids. Like, you could go back through history and you can name the schools that have been involved with some of these bribery schemes in sports betting. Boston College had a player who got busted. Arizona State had a player who got busted. I think both of those were in the 80s. And there's been a few, here and there. But that was kind of the exception, right? I just want to get this. I really want the audience to understand this. 17 programs. And this is on top of other stories that have happened over the past year. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. If we don't think this is happening kind of systemically throughout college athletics, you're out of your mind, right? And so why is this happening? And again, why are these athletes a little bit vulnerable? And so we could see a few things happen. With athletes, let me start this. Let's talk about financial before we get into the actual athletic part of it. College athletes, obviously we know they don't earn pro salaries, and only a few are getting those huge NIL mega deals, right? Most of them are only making maybe a couple thousand. Like that's where a lot of these NIL deals live, right? Not in the, 6 million, 4 million, whatever a quarterback's going to get. Right? And so a $10,000 to $30,000 bribe, well, that could feel like life-changing money to a student athlete. I was not a varsity student athlete, so I wasn't on scholarship, not as a club athlete. So if somebody would have come to me and offered me 10 to 30,000 for whatever, boy, that'd be hard to turn down, right? That was a lot of money for a college student. And so now you've got these college students, and again, the programs that I mentioned, they're recognizable programs, but they're not the Dukes and the Kentuckys and the Kansases and things like that. So they're not making big NIL money. But those programs that I just mentioned, you're not making a lot in NIL. You're going to practice every day. Your time to work is a little bit limited. So all I need to do is maybe shave a few points and you're going to give me 10 grand. Kind of sounds like a good deal. And now with the increased access to these players, you don't even have to strong arm them. The Boston College case, the kid who was shaving points was tied up with the mob. Here, if somebody's living in your dorm and they're your buddy, hey man, why don't you make sure that you guys don't win by more than 10 tonight? We're going to make a cool 2 G's on this game. I'll split it with you. Right? And so while NIL money can increase access to cash, not all of them are making these big paydays. Right? And not only that, but think about you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Put yourself back in those footsteps. And somebody on the NIL, somebody's going to give you $1 million in NIL money, right? Most kids that age, and I use the words kids strategically, right? They're still young men. They're not set up. They don't have the financial literacy to understand what to do with that money. So leadership failure occurs when we assume that education alone is going to offset financial desperation. Right? If we just have seminars, if we just have workshops, if we just have, a meeting a year or a meeting a semester where we say, okay, do this, don't do this. This is what you should do with your money. Instead of actually, walking alongside these students, providing them more resources and access to good people who can help them with their money, of course they're going to be set up to fail. Okay? And so what happens with gambling now, to kind of take you into the locker room a little bit, there's a shift. And the shift focuses from process to outcomes. From the process of you working on your craft and getting better to outcomes of fixing games. In fixing games, it destroys a team, destroys trust in a team, the cohesion that you have within the locker room, the institutional credibility. I mean, in full disclosure, one of the schools that was mentioned is a school I work at. It's a Christian school. It has Christian in the title. As Christian, and reasonable Christians can disagree on this, but I think most come down on the side where gambling would be something that is not conducive to living a good Christian life, especially when you start to put greed up on a pedestal. And so now you as an institution, which has kind of wrapped yourself and cloaked yourself in Christianity and living a Christian lifestyle, now you've had something happen with one of your students that starts to cut against that, right? It's a really tough place to be if you're an administrator. Right? And now one player is compromised. Now the entire team becomes vulnerable, especially if there's nefarious sources on the outside that are driving these things. Right? And so, again, unlike professional college athletes, they attend class with people who bet. They live in dorms with people who bet. They're easily accessible. And even the federal prosecutors, they emphasized in the story that athletes were targeted because they were reachable and vulnerable. And so there's always unintended outcomes to these situations. And I'm not here to tell you, yeah, you shouldn't gamble. Well, actually, yeah, I will. I'm not here to tell you, like, morally or ethically what you should do with your money, or if gambling is something you should or shouldn't do. I will tell you betting on college sports is really stupid and you should put your money somewhere else, right? But if we think this is it and we've rooted it out, you're insane. And so we have this decision from the Supreme Court back in 2017. We'll open up to the states. The states see an opportunity. Hey, we're going to be able to make a lot more money, kind of what they've done with lotteries, where supposedly all that money is supposed to go to education. And great, open it up. But now the unintended consequence is that we've got college athletes seeing a quick payday and breaking the law. And really $10,000, $30,000, that sounds like a lot of money. But in the context of a lifetime, that's not that much money. So I want to get a quick payday as a college athlete, but now I've broke federal law. I'm going to potentially go to prison for maybe up to 20 years on each charge. Right? So if I'm in prison for 60 years because I want to get a $30,000 payday. I mean, is there nobody in leadership, somebody who stepped back and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we think this through? Right? Because now this is introducing risk of coercion, of threats, long-term psychological harm, right, to these student athletes. And so is this a leadership failure or a leadership gap? You know, in the story, the president of the NCAA, he acknowledged that there were nearly 40 players across these 20 schools that had been investigated in the past year. And it's not because of a lack of rules, it's a lack of preventative leadership systems. So some of these leadership blind spots that we see, that treating gambling as a compliance issue instead of a well-being issue. There's a lot of rules that the NCAA has with compliance, and you go through workshops every year on these as an administrator and a student athlete. But I think we've moved beyond that. It is, in my mind, kind of more of a mental health issue, right? And so athletes are already operating in these high pressure environments, and gambling is just going to amplify that pressure. And we've seen more of an emphasis on mental health and mental wellness in athletics, both pro and college. And we've got to get away and shift the thinking with gambling, because again, if you're fixing games, it's illegal. So we got to get away and shift this thinking from, wow, it's more of a compliance issue, to no, it really is a well-being athlete for these young people. Right? Leadership blind spot. It also overestimates athletes' ability to self-regulate. You could have the best compliance meetings and rules meetings and all that that you could come up with. But at the end of the day, we kind of expect athletes to kind of regulate themselves. Now, there are some roadblocks that we put up, and there are some hurdles that are along the way, and in kind of areas where kind of some fail-safe areas along the way. But when it comes to something like this, you know, it's really up to the athlete to do what's right. Right? And we're also underestimating these organized betting networks. It is not hard, again, because you're living amongst gamblers. It is not hard to have a network of gambling where you're getting athletes and you're having them do this, and they're making paydays while you're kind of running these organized gambling rings, and you're making paydays. Right? So not only do we have to do a good job of maintaining the well-being of our athletes, we also need to figure out a way to regulate students, just regular students, on these college campuses that have, I mean, their access is right here. It is not hard for them to bring up these apps, right? So what are we doing from a leadership perspective? Point shaving. So yeah, let's go down this road. All right, how leadership has to act. Point shaving, it's not poor judgment, it's intentional team betrayal. In the leadership response, I think of three things as I was making my notes here. It has to be decisive and ethical. One, we got to remove them from competition. If you think or an athlete is caught up in gambling, we got to get him or her out of competition. And we have to have some coordination with our compliance department, with the legal department, and then mental health professionals as well. Right? Because this can become an addiction. It might not just be an easy payday. We might have a student who's really struggling with something here. All right. We got to get them help, professional help. And then we need to be transparent on this to kind of protect that team trust. Hey, this happened. And I also think there's some other effects with that. That one, it can help maintain some of that team cohesion, and maybe we can bring people around this student athlete who's struggling. But two, it also kind of sets the tone that this will not be tolerated here, and we're going to take this seriously. All right. So, we can run players and we can shame them and we can do all this toughness culture type of stuff, but that doesn't do anything to prevent corruption. Right? We can't punish our way out of like system level ethical failure that we're dealing with. Right? So what would be effective? One, proactive education, not just one-time compliance sessions, but ongoing education. Making sure mentally that our players are doing well, our student athletes are doing well. Who do we have on staff? Who can we bring in to make sure that our players have somebody to talk to? Let's say somebody is in trouble with some nefarious people because of gambling, but I don't want to talk to my coach. I'm a little bit scared, right? Do we have anybody who can come alongside them and help them out? Right? We also need to do a better job with financial literacy, with things in our NIL guidance. Because that's another thing people don't talk about. If I'm the second string quarterback and I see this quarterback here and he's making $4 million a year, but I'm not really making much of anything, right? Well, man, a $30,000 payday to do a little bit of gambling here on the side, or to give out some information, to tip people. That sounds pretty good because, man, this guy, he bought a new car and he's got these clothes and he's able to do all this cool stuff. I'm kind of jealous of that. All right. So we need to do a good job kind of helping these athletes understand, everything that goes into NIL and when money comes in and taxes and what they should be doing with this money to set themselves up well for the future. Right. Anonymous reporting systems, zero tolerance for integrity violations. And again, just collaborating with all the different people that we have on campus. So that's what we can do as athletic leaders, right? What I would like to see done is really, and I know a lot of people won't like this, I think, one, prop bets in college absolutely have to go, and I think a lot of places have started to realize that and take action there. But I would like to see a ban on college gambling. I think we're probably going to see some of these same issues in the pros, maybe not as much because pro athletes make a lot of money and you certainly don't want to mess up that gravy train. But the professional career is only about 3.5 years across all the professional sports. So it's not like people are making hundreds of $millions being a professional athlete. Their careers are very short and not all of them are getting those big paydays past their rookie deal. So, I think you can make an argument that gambling really should be outlawed, but with college athletics, just because of the age of these players, of the vulnerability of these players, and with the really lack of upside of what could happen, I don't see an issue getting rid of college gambling altogether. And that's probably going to take some congressional action. I don't think, your FanDuels and your sports your DraftKings and all those places are going to do that just out of the goodness of their heart, right? Because they're going to lose out on a lot of money. Frankly, I really don't care. But I think if we really want to do what's best for student athletes from a leadership perspective. And believe me, I don't like government getting involved in anything, especially people outside of college athletics. I really don't like it. However, I do think we're at a point now where there's going to have to be some congressional action to help protect, in my mind, what I think is a vulnerable population here in college gambling. So federal prosecutors, they called this scheme historic. The real question in front of us, will college sport leaders and government leaders, are they going to respond historically? Or are we just going to continue to be reactive? We might not be able to stop gambling, right? But we can stop pretending that athletes are immune to the pressures that are coming out because of it. So now we need to do more to protect athletes before they're targeted, not after these indictments are unsealed. So that's my take on the college sport gambling crisis that I see going on right now. And the fact that colleges have started to enter into sponsorship deals with gambling sites, again, just blows my mind. And that's been going on here for the past couple of years. I mean, is there nobody who can look out for what the student athlete's best interest is? And sometimes that means, we might not let you do this, but it's for your own good. As parents, we do it all the time with our kids. I don't understand why we can't do the same with the population who's more vulnerable to the negative aspects of gambling than ever before. So until next time, love God, love each other, be a good sport. We'll see you in the next episode.